It's monthly Mormon Mondays. It's time for the secret handshake. Tune in and reach through the veil. It's time for monthly Mormon Monday.
Happy Monday. Happy monthly Mormon Monday.
Yes.
I'm Paranoid American, and this is
Heidi Love from the Unfiltered Rise.
And we've got a special treat today. We are I don't know what the hell this series is going to end up being, but so far it's been incredibly fascinating. And this episode might be my favorite yet, and it's only starts out as Mormonism, and then it gets into some really wild stuff that I've never read before. And I'm glad, like, I would never have come across this book if it weren't for talking about just like weird Mormon history. So thank you, Heidi, for introducing me to weird Mormon stuff and even like leading to this.
It was definitely an interesting find. This one, I was like, really? Because
we're talking Kilton Riggs Stewart, and I've never heard that name before this. Have you ever heard that name?
Only with studying for our stuff, trying to find weird stuff. Nope.
and he was big in Salt Lake City, Utah. He went to a bunch of the colleges there. He became a Mormon missionary. And so this was an interesting part because some of his work makes it into the mainstream, and almost none of the mainstream articles mention anything at all about him being a Mormon. Like you wouldn't even know if you knew his work or any of his books. And even the articles that I found that mention Mormonism, some of them even stress that he was an ex-Mormon. You know, this isn't Mormon stuff. And I don't know, like I tried to look into that, and I didn't get that impression from his own writings.
Well,
from his path.
Said he got in trouble. I think he
don't have that at all. Like this is some wild stuff.
He may have been excommunicated. From what I saw, he did quote once that Joseph Smith was the first story he had heard of, this 14-year-old boy story, and it made him question things, right? Because of the talking about the lack of wisdom, go ask of God. So he used that in his mind because I feel like he probably was incredibly smart. And then he started going and talking to his priesthood leaders, it said. And it said, and I quote, which got me into trouble with the priesthood. That was all he said. And so I'm assuming trouble usually means that you got either excommunicated or disfellowshipped. It could have been a disfellowship, but
what's the difference technically between those two?
It's kind of like one's on probation and one you're just out. You just did the wrong thing and you're gone.
Disfellowship is you're on probation.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And he never went back. So my guess is he probably got excommunicated because he didn't say he didn't believe in it. Also, it was interesting. He was with some lady, last name was Parsons. I think Claudia was her name. And anyways, she had said that he had even talked to her about having all the keys and knowing the full scope of Mormonism, which I found interesting, which he would have, because any missionary goes through the temple and gets all the temple rights. So, I mean, if he still took it, seriously, even though he couldn't go, which many people do, obviously, I'm curious if he took off his Jesus jammies, but he did get pretty sexy time weird later. His sexy time weird got like pretty funny later.
I want to hear about that because none of that came up, and I think both of us went on totally different angles on this guy, which is going to make this an interesting one. So I ended up reading his most famous book, which is called Pygmies and Dream Giants, and like I was telling you constantly, I would have to stop and make sure that. Like, I was not convinced that this was a nonfiction book. So it is a nonfiction book. It is his own diary of like these crazy adventures he went on in the Philippines and Hawaii and just all over the world. Papua New Guinea, he hung out with like headhunters and cannibals. And so I kept stopping and I was like, this person's name. Like, there's no way this is a real person. And then sure enough, it'd be the real person. And he would mention like a boat he was on, and I would look up the boat and it would all match up. So eventually, I guess I'm 90% convinced that it's real. And you've convinced me that it's real. And there's
I think it's real.
It seems real, but man, this is like so. So I read the book, and then I read his paper that I think inspired the book, and for him to go on this whole adventure. And it's all about lucid dreaming and using like astral, the astral realm to fix problems. It's and that's as far as I went. So I got into the like from his own words angle, and then you found out a whole bunch of stuff about his like personal life.
Yes, there was some papers, I guess, that were like his families that were entered, and they were like in the University of Utah. And so they were talking about like him as like talking about him in the past, like his family. And so these letters were from his family talking about him. And he said that he always liked his stories and Kilton's technique. He said at the University of Colorado until his retirement, explained Kilton's technique. He would approach a dozen women a day and ask them if they wanted to make love, and 11 would slap him, but the 12th might actually say yes. So he kept doing it over and over again.
It's the numbers game. That's smart.
Oh my gosh, it made me laugh. More seriously, making love and expounding on dreams, values, and mortality were closely intertwined for Stewart. So I was like, wow, okay then. And all these people, so he had cheated. Well, they said that even the impressions from all his Mormon relatives were all good, basically. They said even his female relatives that were younger than him all said that they didn't like that the different incest taboos were not a barrier to Stewart his chase of love. So he did not care if they were even related. And so also, I guess he was from a big family of polygamists. His grandpa had taken off either his dad or his I think it was his grandpa. And when the whole Mormonism separation came down from the church and state, like I was telling you the one time where they were like, it's got to stop because they're going to take everything from us. They went to Mexico so he could keep his 4 wives. So this family was pretty interesting. And
they were Mormon as hell is what it sounds like.
Right. Yeah. Incest and all. And they all say that he was just great and he was just a wonderful guy and always happy. It was really hard to find a picture of him. I looked and looked, like as an author, you semi-expect, I mean, he died in the 60s. It's not that long ago. Like there were photographs, Man, I found one, and it was only because I researched his girlfriend, who was his side piece, by the way. She wasn't the main piece. The main piece was his wife, and she's the one that keeps all the papers. This is why it's so damn hard to find anything about him, because she doesn't want it out on the internet, I guess. I don't know. So
I came across that too. There was someone that had mentioned in some of this research that like the estate doesn't let any of the private writings or anything out. So until the estate's gone, like a lot of this guy's personal effects are kind of locked away.
Which is so weird. And I think possibly it could be, like in my thoughts as a woman, this could be a jealousy situation because he had this side piece girl, not only her, but many women, obviously, from what I just read you.
And in the book, in the Pygmies and Dream Giants, he takes on a wife.
Yeah. Yep. And so the wife is the one that has the estate locked down. And so that's my guess, is she's probably pissed off, right? That he was doing other wifery.
In the Pygmy book is he gets a Pygmy wife and he leaves.
No, another wife. Yes.
Yeah, like many wives, which is very typical Mormon.
He's Mormon. Yeah. And he comes from a polygamous family, so it probably really wasn't, that bad. I guess he loved his Studebaker with his girlfriend. It was like one of his weird things. Here, I'll just share it because it was funny. It was the only picture I could find. It was literally one picture, and he's just a normal looking guy. Like I was like, okay, let me open it first. But I just thought, okay, that's weird. But like for so many years to go by, somebody's holding stuff back because there's no way Like with this day and age and everything else, like there's got to be more stuff, you know. I forget how to share. Let's
Well,
see.
especially if he's hitting up 12 girls at a time every day and locking in at least one of them, you know, he's probably got lots of stories to tell.
Oh, I'm certain. I'm just like, well, I guess they didn't want that out or whatever. Cause I mean, must have locked that down.
Well, and I have to mention too that he sounds like he was a experienced hypnotist. So you can't really
Yes, he
discount
was.
that.
Yes.
There might have been something of that going on. Oh, wait. Oh, here you go.
So pretty funny. I have to minimize this. All right, I'll be right back. Let's see here. And if we could get to the downloads.
So not a looker.
Slower. I mean, he was okay. Like he's just a short little guy, but he has this picture with his Studebaker, which I think is hilarious. Can you see it?
The short king.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's not bad. I mean,
that's him and his side piece with his Studebaker.
He's got like a Bonnie and Clyde thing going on.
Yeah, it definitely looks like a Bonnie and Clyde thing. But I mean, they said he was a little more stout than most guys. I can't really tell if he's fat or just broad, you know, in that suit. So, but that's him. And that's the only picture I can find. And that was because it's the girlfriends and not the wives. And so that's my guess as to why she was so pissed, right? Probably.
Yeah, and well, this is new information to me because as I was reading the book, I couldn't get a handle, at least when he wrote it, which I think it was in like 1935 or something. He doesn't necessarily talk about having a girlfriend or a wife or anything.
Yeah, he was.
So
that was definitely older because I mean that car is old. Like this is older. This isn't 60s. This is definitely 30s. Studebaker, you know.
Maybe this was his like awakening. Like this was him going out because it also read as though this adventure when he goes off and meets the Pygmies. And he also calls them Negritos throughout the whole of this book. But that before he goes and does that, everything else he's been doing has been sort of under the eye of academia. You know, he's working through the universities and he's working under other people's. And then this is when he decides, like, I'm going to go and pursue this idea that got me kicked out of the Mormon church, essentially, because he brought it up to the elders. And I'm just going to paraphrase and just assume what he said because we have got no records because of his jealous wife, right? But it was almost like, hey, elders, and tell me how accurate this sounds. You know, knock, 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 the 3 special knocks. You do the handshake, and you go, hey, elders, I want to go and document the nightmares and the dreams of Pygmies and prove that we are all equal, that a Pygmy child and a Mormon child are the same child, and that the only difference is their environment and there's nothing else. And I can imagine the elders were like, that's a great idea. In fact,
definitely not. They were not white and delightsome.
In 1930s,
we're back to that.
Not in the 90s, in the 30s.
No. This did not go over well, but also his actual thoughts on sexuality and dreams. Did you read that?
Yeah, that he's in one of his first papers, he believed that if you ever had a sex dream, that you needed to see it full all the way to orgasm.
Yes.
And then if you didn't, you were causing like mental issues for yourself.
I think that would have played a huge part because he said, even if it was your family member, like your sister or somebody.
Sorry.
Yeah. And so I'm sure that probably got some people going, you know what? You're a little messed up, guys. So just move on and he did. It was weird that he had this vagabond life. Did you see that somebody actually wrote a vagabond book about how he got around? Which was fantastic. I didn't. So, and it was called something Vagabond. And I think American Vagabond, if I remember correctly. But
Kilton Riggs Stewart.
It was about him hopping on trains and boats and different things unpaid for. He was like notorious of traveling the world with like no money. And so he would just go do this stuff. And like, I think it was Noon that wrote the book. His partner, Noon, he took that partner with him. And I think he wrote that book about him later. And I don't know how well that went over, but it was pretty interesting that he would actually be able to go. He went everywhere. He was in China. He was in Philippines. He was in Hawaii. He was all over the place. And people were like, that can't possibly be with no money. And he like had the neck. Apparently,
Well, that's what
he
I'm
probably
saying. I
played the part.
kept having to stop and be like, "This is nonfiction, right? Or is this fiction? Or is it nonfiction?"
I know.
And
I know.
I kept being convinced, like, okay, it's nonfiction. There's the boat name, and then I'd get like another 2 chapters and be like, wait, like, okay, hold on, are we sure that this is nonfiction?
Oh, yep. Because it seems crazy. It just seems for a guy that grew up in Provo, Utah, and just this normal family, like other than the polygamy, but that was pretty normal around here. I mean, you know, he did get his master's at the U of psychology, but then he traveled all over and he said he got his doctorate and all this stuff. And I don't know if he did. Did you see all that? I don't think there was any proof that he became a doctor. I think
He
he
got it in
became a
Papua
doctor.
New Guinea on the side of the road. He doesn't.
Yes, exactly. Oh, he includes it. They said in his book he trumped up all of his academia and was like trying to make it way better than it was, which is also very Mormon.
In his paper, he makes a specific claim that he had spent 15 years in like these different cultures. And I did read another paper published way after his death that was like, he didn't spend no 15 years anywhere.
No.
Like, what he did was he read a book about a guy and that guy spent like 14 years and then he spent like a year and he like added those two together to get his 15 years to again like puff himself up a little bit.
He was very Mormon that way. That sounds like a very male Mormon attribute.
Really? What? Just puffing up your resume?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they because they have all the knowledge and they are the chosen people and they are even better than Masons. I don't know if you know that. They say that they have the true Masonry and that they have the knowledge even better than you or anyone else. Yeah. And so they're very like that. You know, they're very elitist. And I feel like that is just a Mormon trait, not just for men, but for women as well, because they always say, we have the one true gospel. Everybody else is crazy. Everybody else is led astray. Everybody else is this or that. So it kind of goes into that whole message of like, okay, that's weird. Yeah. And you can see it. It's still a thing. Very much present.
Well, I started this out because I had a question about him being this quote unquote ex-Mormon, but it was almost like the Mormons didn't want him, but he never necessarily stopped being Mormon. He just stopped being allowed to be like an official Mormon because even in his book, he refers to Joseph Smith as like a constant inspiration. And it feels like his Mormon upbringing like shaped his entire life's work and that there's really no separation of it. So
definitely.
How much are you, do you think, like ex-Mormon? How much of your ex-Mormonism is the church rejected you compared to like you left? Does that make sense?
Because I left it and it didn't leave me. So
right, but you went through like 20 years
I did.
Programming. So like that doesn't just go
longer.
Away, right?
Yeah, 34 years. I was born in. So 34 years at least. You could even say 25 cognitive years, but
so you will always be more Mormon than any non-Mormon on the face of the planet forever.
I hope not.
No one's gone through 30 years of Mormon programming.
I know. It's so bad. And actually they keep changing their programming. So now like Mormons are like, that's not even Mormon. I'm like, yes, it was.
Okay, boomer.
Right? Yeah. I'm like, wait, what? Did they Mandela you?
No, we look in the hat now. What are you talking about?
I know. And they do. They do that. And then they're like, and no collab for you. Yeah. And I'm like, wait, this was a thing. And they're like, you're just crazy. You're just one of those crazy ex-Mormons. I'm like, but I probably read more about it than you ever will. Because I will say this, I know way more about Mormons now than I ever knew as a Mormon because they discourage it. They discourage learning. They don't want you to have, which would also play into this story because if he's trying to learn, which he said he got really fascinated. I don't know if you knew this. This also got him in trouble. He went on his mission and he became fascinated with the way frogs' eggs are like inseminated or whatever.
This was his whole thing. I didn't fully get it. Like I think I understand the concept, but he described it that he had like a science class and that they were showing the eggs inside of this frog and that the teacher or someone took like a flashlight and they shined it on the egg. And when they did that, you could see like on the egg itself, like this little creature, but then like projected on the back. And this is the part where I'm assuming is what he's talking about, is that there's like a huge shadow of like the head, and that he was kind of equating this to like, oh, there's the real head, but then there's this giant, this dream giant in the background, this like monster head. And that's where this concept of dream giant kind of came from, was like the shadow of the head inside the embryo of a frog.
That would not go over well. Like back in the day, this, you have to remember, like now I feel like the church has really come forward on a lot, like, and they're like all about, in fact, the thing we can't talk about, they were all for that in 2020, all for it, and told everyone to do it. So like now they're very science oriented, whereas before I feel like that would have been shunned because that's spooky. You're delving into some like occultic, even though they're occult as hell. Like, I mean, their whole inception is a cult. Let's be realistic. I mean, now I know that.
Cut it out with all the magic stuff. Now put on these underpants and don't tell anyone.
Yeah, don't tell anyone. And also, like, we have basically the Enochian alphabet is how this whole Joseph Smith translation happened. And it came from an angel. It doesn't sound like John Dee had anything to do with that at all. So, okay, whatever. Like,
but correct me. You mentioned that you think that Joseph Smith did talk to someone.
I 100%. I 100% feel that he and John Dee had almost the same experience, except John Dee's lasted a lot longer. And well, who even knows? Because Joseph may have stopped talking about it because he started looking pretty crazy when he dug up his dead brother. So about that time frame, I think people were like, "You're not quite right," and I think he started like shutting up. But
if you believe that, doesn't that mean that you are kind of Mormon still? Like if you believe that Joseph Smith was talking to spirits,
I truly believe in another side of things of the world, whether it's for John Dee or Joseph Smith, right? Like, but do I think they were good spirits? Absolutely not. No way. Because it says in the Bible, even if an angel shows up and gives you another book in my name, to what? Not believe them. And so he already kind of pre-covered this because God's like that. And he's like, by the way, if Muhammad or Joseph or anybody comes on up and starts talking to you about their book, probably not. And
unless they got the secret handshake.
Yeah. And even Crowley, well, Crowley did have the secret handshake and he did the Lima and that still didn't work out. So he channeled AWAS just the same and he made that book of the law. So I'm just saying, like, I'm smart enough to know this. There are things we will never understand and we shouldn't exactly be involved in all of that. If you can, but accept your consequences. Like all those people didn't die the best. I'm just saying. Like, it wasn't good.
Do you know how Kilton Riggs Stewart died?
He actually just died of cancer. But he died fairly young. So, I mean,
yeah, well, I would assume like 60s or something.
60s of cancer. And so, I mean, his wasn't terrible, but I'm talking about like Joseph and, you know, even Crowley didn't die the best. Like, I mean, but whatever. People are going to people. And here's what we have to do. We have to learn from it and go, maybe not for me. Maybe no. And
vicariously live through the people that have done all these weird things.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not going to channel angels. I feel like that is definitely not on my list. No matter how much stuff I want to know, I think I'm good. Because then there was wife swapping and child rape and just, you know, all the things. It's bad. It's a bad practice. We're going to have to figure that out.
The description that he talks about the pygmies that he stays with doesn't sound any necessarily better than anything that he came from in Utah.
No, definitely not. And there was like people dying all around from malaria and he had his little net and he was like thankful for that. But I'm like, it doesn't sound good. He almost drowned there. Did you read that? I think
a couple times. Yeah. And then he was like questioning if he should have done this. Like he had so many close calls with death, but honestly, a lot of them was just him like doing something and everyone thinking that he was a black magician. And now it was like, they might kill me because, you know, I sneezed and I didn't cover my mouth or what. One of them was that he ate blueberries and red berries at the same time. And this was like one of the biggest taboos in the culture and he didn't know it. And he kept just doing these like faux pas over and over again. So then it was like, what's this dude doing? Is he trying to bring the wrath of God down on us? And like
he's trying to curse us.
His guide had to keep putting him in check. So I've got I feel like this is maybe a neutral introduction. It's a quick little bio of this guy, Kilton Riggs Stewart. So I just want to read this real quick bio, and then I want to see what you think. If there's anything missing, obviously all of the hanky panky and
hanky panky
out a day, that's not covered in this one. I think this one came from like a eulogy or something.
Oh, okay.
So Kilton Riggs Stewart was born to a devout Mormon family in Salt Lake City in 1903. And after graduation from high school, he served as a Mormon missionary in Quebec, Nova Scotia for 3 years, exhorting everyone he met to discover in personal dreams and visions the truth of Mormon teachings. When he learned his unusual approach to potential converts was not acceptable in the Mormon church, he left it. As an ex-Mormon, he discarded their doctrines about smoking, drinking, and sex. He also lost his belief in any afterlife and came to think of God as a natural force center within each man and no more. And then it said, in fact, Stewart's knowledge of the Senoi came entirely through a young British anthropologist named Noon, who was making a name for himself by studying them. And Noon had gained publicity from his reports with an alleged ability to communicate with elephants in their language. So accepted Stewart as a visitor for a maximum of 6 months in 1935 and 1936. During this time, Stewart did not learn the language of the Senoi and depended entirely on Noon's accounts. Later in 1939, the two men met in England to make use of Noon's notes about the tribe for a couple of months. And in his thesis, Stewart gave credit to Noon for providing him with most of his data about the Senoi. But in that paper is where he said that he was with the Senoi for 15 years. So really it was like he got invited by Noon, and then Noon shared his notes, and then somehow Stewart kind of like absorbed Noon's entity and like all of his work and was like, I did this. You know what I mean?
So he did say, I mean, I know he didn't do it for the amount of time he says, but he did the mental testing while the other guy did all the asking. So I guess there were certain things, and I'm betting it has to do with his hypnosis. And that's probably why he got to go, because everybody knew he was this great hypnotist, and they said mental tests. They didn't say what. And so I found that interesting, because I'm like, okay, he needed him for some reason, because overall he's just this free loafer. He's like literally showed up at Noon's house a week before Noon was even home and just like lounged around and ate all his food. Like it was weird. He just like showed up and was like, oh, I'm
getting
here,
like Matthew McConaughey, like failure to launch vibes here.
Yeah, exactly. He was like all about that action. And then I know he didn't stay as long. And people do say that he liked to exaggerate everything. Like if he almost died and he just slipped, he like almost drowned and almost fell off a cliff, and almost like it was way more like interesting.
He actually just like kind of stumbled a little bit on a pebble, and he's like, I almost fell off a cliff.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. And
that
so he was very about that.
So many close calls with death in this freaking book.
Yeah, I think he was very, people say he was very funny and like full of life and fun, and that he exaggerated a lot. So I'm like, all right, this makes complete sense. That's why it is the way it is, because he's an exaggerator and this is his book. And so it makes sense. You know,
you're allowed to, if you're writing your own book, you're allowed to exaggerate.
Yeah, you can exaggerate.
Although,
but don't you think that he is like the number one Uno MK Ultra guy? Like I'm just saying.
Well, I think that MK Ultra, in a very real way, like the original, because MK Ultra arguably wasn't until the late 40s at its earliest, but I think they were like, dude, look what these dudes were doing over in like Papua New Guinea and Philippines. Like we should look back into this a little bit, like, because
he served in the military too for a little while. Did you see that?
Well, and yeah, so he had all sorts of excuses to travel all over the world, whether it was through research grants for all sorts of like state departments of education, and through military, through the Mormon church as a missionary, through academia. So he kind of like, it's interesting to hear him jumping on trains and like being a stowaway and stuff, like as this vagabond.
And a
But
good one. A good
but-
one. Yeah.
But he also had people that he could hit up that would just give him money to like just go and do his thing.
Yep. Yeah, he was very like taken care of. He was, and it makes me wonder about this lady with the Studebaker. And I'm like, he was a gigolo. Like, he was good at it. Obviously, he knew what he was doing. I mean, he had a lot of practice, but I'm like, oh, okay, that's what's going on here. I see. Like, that makes more sense if you think about it. You know, if she was, I don't know if it was her or not, but if it was her, you know, paying for things or other women, that would make more sense because the guys get sick of it fast. Like this noon, he was like, get out of here. Like, I'm done with you. You know, like you're not helpful. And even he said, I don't know if you caught this in the book, but he said he did his best thinking laying down. And so he would just lay around and be like, all right, blink your eyes twice. Because he was doing the testing. I don't know how he was doing testing laying down. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but
I love
whatever.
that. No, I do.
Oh, it's so funny. He was like, prop my feet up.
And he does mention they don't give a full list of all the tests, but they do mention like 2 or 3 of them by name, and I had to look them up. And one of them is a maze test, and the way that the maze test works is that they'll give you just like a really simple maze. Like if you go and take your kids out to the restaurant and they give you like the little kids menu and it's got like a really simple maze on it. It's sort of like that, and the rules are that you get a pencil. And as soon as the pencil touches the paper, you're not allowed to lift it again. And you have to find your way like through a maze or out of a maze. But the extra rules are that you can't touch the walls. You also aren't supposed to double back. So what that means is that you're supposed to, like, as you're going through it, every time you come to an intersection, I assume that they would expect you to stop and then like mentally trace where the maze might go so that you don't accidentally take the wrong corridor or whatever. I doubt that he's sitting these pygmy kids down and explaining all these intricate rules. Because in one of the explanations, he was like, he couldn't get through to them that they weren't supposed to be simulating an actual mouse. Like he almost described it like the kid would put the pencil down and make it like jiggle around and like run up against the wall.
You didn't even know what to do with it.
Well, because they were like making it to be like a, and then the other one was the draw a figure test or a draw a human test. And from this one sent me on a whole rabbit hole that I won't get too far into. But the draw a human test, it's supposed to be an early indicator of like hallucinatory thoughts or paranoia or schizophrenia or any sort of way that you're not processing the outside world properly. And the way that you would look at it is that if someone drew a figure and the limbs were detached, like the arm was just floating and not connected to the body or anything, or if things were like way out of proportion. And another example is if they drew like really big eyes, then that means you're paranoid. Which I actually love drawing big eyes on all my artwork.
Paranoid American checks out.
But that, like, these are some of the tests that they were doing. And what's interesting is that latter one is still somewhat used in recognizing like the effects of someone that might be going through schizophrenia or, you know, have early onset, you know, dementia or Alzheimer's or any of these things that are kind of in that dementia praecox room.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense, but also if you look at like psychology of drawing on kids, like it changes and the eyes are really big. If you're under a certain age, they just draw like these gigantically out of proportion bodies in general till they're older. And there's like a whole psychotherapy with this, like that's normal. Like, and so you'll get these kids with a bubble head and great big eyes for a while. And then things start and they don't have noses and like they're missing stuff. So, I mean, it's like all cognition, which they're like, oh yeah, this happens, blah, 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 for like normal childhood development for everyone. So then he's probably I'm saying he's stretching it there, but who knows?
Well, and the way that he paints this is that he's using these tests on children in all these, you know, remote regions that have never interacted with like Western culture. Right. And he's trying to figure out, did they do the maze tests and did they do the drawing tests any better or worse than people in other places of the world? And he kind of concludes that they're pretty much the same. And this is where he bases his whole theory around, is that every human starts out almost as like this blank slate. And then depending on the information and the training and like how you raise them, that's what makes all the difference. And he's using these tests as his proof of that.
Right. Nature versus which the Mormon church would definitely hate, because they are elitists, as I've said, and they feel that they are far better than anyone else.
Like these kids aren't waiting to light. So what are you talking about?
No, that's why I'm saying they would hate it. They would hate that information coming out, that it's basically the same, because they would want it to be like, well, we raised our kids the right way and they should be way better and they should have IQ out the wazoo and blah, blah, blah. And they should be doing it way better, very elitism type stuff. So they would hate that. They would hate like a comparison to anyone brown.
And even better is his baseline comparison. So this has some of those, that like racism of low expectation feel to it, where it's like, we'll just go and find some like poor black people out in the wild and they'll probably be maybe as smart as our dumb kids. So he starts a baseline with the feeble-minded children, which is like I guess a collection in Utah. So he's finding all these like developmentally challenged Mormon kids, and that
they were marrying their sister. So
that okay, and he didn't judge. He was actually into that.
No,
but
he
that was his
liked
baseline.
It.
And he even mentions it later on in the book that he comes on some people that are resistant to some of his hypnosis techniques, and he realizes that they're not responding well to commands. And he remembered back that when he was working with these developmentally challenged Mormon children, that if he used like suggestion or like asked them to consider something as opposed to telling them to do something, then that would make them more receptive. And he applies that to the Pygmies, and it like pays out. And that's some classic NLP tactic, by the way, that you're not supposed to command. You're supposed to say things like, imagine what it would look like if, you cleaned your room. Imagine how cool it would be clean. It's not like clean your room. But for him being 1930s and realizing this intuitively is kind of remarkable to me.
Yeah, no, I think that he probably had like I said, a lot bigger IQ than most people. So obviously, even if the kids weren't inbred, if he's seeing these other normal, right, like kids that are just like not very wise in the world, he's like this studious guy, super smart. Like obviously this guy's functioning at a different level than the farm guy down the road. So he's probably trying to figure that out in general, like probably why is this happening? Why has this happened, etc. But not only that, I just think his full ability to let himself, like from his family's description, be who he was and he gave no F's. He gave 0 F's about what anybody thought, which is either he's brilliant or he's completely crazy, right? Either he's a psychopath or, there's a fine line. There's a fine line. And so, because also psychopaths don't give an F about what anybody thinks, and so I don't know which it is, but from his family's description, it sounds like it was probably not a psychopath, because they all loved him. Even they said he was God gone wrong. That was what there was a quote.
Wow, that's quite a quote.
And I thought it was so funny. They were like, yeah, he was just God gone wrong. Like,
oh man,
we don't know.
I have to use that I'm going to write that down. That would be a great name for something. I don't know,
so
a comic
funny.
Or a shirt.
Oh, for sure. Oh, that could definitely
God
be
gone wrong. All right.
Yeah,
that might be the new slogan for monthly Mormon Mondays. God gone wrong.
God gone wrong. Yeah, because then we could open into other religions. However, Mormonism could take years.
Well, we have to fix Mormonism first, and once we've fixed it, we can move on to the next one that we fix.
Well, yeah, we've got a lot of work to do on Mormonism.
I'd say we're going to fix Catholicism next.
Oh my gosh, I don't know. Oh, we got our work cut out for us. I don't know.
Okay, so I've got a lot of quotes from the book.
Boy.
I'm not going to go through all of them, just because we'd be here for like 6 hours unless you're down. But I want to cover like the really interesting ones, and it's hard to pick because this is a fascinating book. So.
Oh yeah, weird.
So good. So this is from the very first chapter, and he does an interesting writing technique. And there was someone that was throwing some shade, like these weird inside digs, because someone said that this was his main book, and that it was written, and I'm paraphrasing, in a very untypically good way. Like they were almost saying like this guy sucked at writing, but somehow this book didn't suck. That was the review from like a close friend.
Well,
it took me back a little
you know
bit.
why? Do you know why a little bit?
I assuming he had someone ghostwrite it.
So the family said he was a horrific speller and a horrific writer, and so he got his side piece. That's how they met. She was his typist, and she was super annoyed at him. Yep, and he kept redoing this book over and over, and she kept having to type it up, and she's like, "Cut it out." So like, eventually he stopped it, and she finished the book. But she was actually super intelligent, so that's how that all.
This makes a lot of sense. Okay, that explains that entirely. See, these are interesting little tidbits.
Yes, because I'm all about like, what did that girlfriend say? What?
Dish the tea on Stewart.
Yeah, I'm the tea side of this business.
Okay, so this is from the very first chapter, which I guess credit to his side piece that made it interesting. But she does this approach where she puts him at like this moment of peril at the very first chapter and has him like, how did I get, record scratch? You might be wondering how I got here. Like that's kind of how this book starts out. And that exact moment, this is the paragraph of that. It says, maybe it was wrong to study people and their gods, to observe and record their dreams, their magic, and their ceremonies. Perhaps observing headhunters had made me guilty of all the murders they had committed. Perhaps the Negrito god, Talandian, whose secrets I had learned, was holding me responsible for all the incest and blood feuds which had gone unavenged since the beginning of time. Or maybe I had already sinned before that fateful evening a year earlier when I visited the Hattendorps and my expedition had its inception. Perhaps Mrs. Hattendorp had realized I was already lost. Perhaps she had been looking through my skin at some diabolical state of inner stagnation or damnation when she insisted on learning what I was running away from. And now it's like, wait, his side piece wrote that. So she's the one that's like saying that he's running away from stuff or that he's got some like weird thing going on.
No,
in him.
for sure. And she's like, why does he keep leaving? It's like he has some secret wives or something. And he does.
He does. In like every zip code, area code, country, county.
He had hoes in other area codes for sure. He was all, and she's like probably salty. Like, why does he keep leaving? Going back to her.
And then, so there's a couple descriptions of what they consider pygmies, and this is also something that I came up in reading articles about him and his work. That they keep saying pygmies, but they're not real pygmies. They just happen to be these different Filipino cultures that were sort of off the beaten path. They weren't following any sort of like government. But that they weren't necessarily pygmies. They were all called Negritos, which just means little black people. But even
they were tiny though. They were
tiny.
People,
they were all under
weird.
5 feet apparently. So
yeah,
like, you can understand why they called them pygmies, but they weren't like the technical definition of pygmy. I guess okay. I'm still not a pygmy expert, even after reading an entire book called Pygmies and Dreams.
Get your crap together. Get being a pygmy expert.
So he goes to dinner with this like Mr. and Mrs. Haddonthorpe, and he writes that that I wanted to try on some neighborhood children the psychological test I plan to use on the Negritos. With them, I hope to explore my favorite psychological theory that all men develop from a single mental pattern, and that this pattern can be discovered by a psychological study of successive levels of humans, ranging from the primitive to the sophisticate. You can guess who's the sophisticate and who's the primitive in this book. The single pattern I regarded as central to the mind builds the physical body of every man from the elements of his environment and establishes and maintains vital rhythms and normal states of that body. And then he said that the Negritos, pygmies who live by hunting and gathering fruits and nuts, who did not settle anywhere, even to sow crops, were the most primitive people of such study, and tribes of them were scattered in various parts of the world, in Africa, New Guinea, the Philippines, and other parts of Malaysia. So he's basically saying that he wants to go and find like the most rudimentary, like blank slate of a human that hasn't had any sophistication of the Western world. And he's like, we'll go find little black people in Africa. Like that's clearly going to be like, ground zero. I don't know. There's something really odd, but very like, this sounds like a typical 1930s
tacky.
white anyone,
Yeah.
Mormon,
Super
Protestant,
bad.
anyone, right?
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Is that how all Mormons think? Do all Mormons think pygmies are below them?
I mean, in that day and age, they weren't letting people go to heaven that were black.
It's not right to look down on pygmies. It's hard not to though because they're so tiny.
I mean, I think if they were white pygmies, it would have gone better, right? Like because I'm being honest, they were horrible. They were horrible to brown and especially black people because they believed they were cursed, right? So
wait, I don't get any of that vibe whatsoever from Kilton Riggs Stewart.
No,
so
I don't think he was necessarily like 100 in that one but that could have been part of why he got excommunicated.
Well, I think it is because that was his original theory was like, hey, we're like your kid, your white and delightsome Mormon child is just as good as this pygmy from Africa. You can imagine that an elder might not appreciate that comparison, but
no,
like he almost see like outside of the racism of low expectations, right? But he definitely seemed very open to all people are created equal and they could all be made equal. And he's got some really mind-blowing approaches on this that like didn't offend me. There a lot of that was like, oh my god, these are some really deep thing. He brings up the bicameral mind theory. I don't know if you've ever heard the bicameral mind theory before.
I don't know what that is.
So this I don't know where my notes are for. It's somewhere in this page of like 38 quotes that I got, but I'll butcher it in a little way just to give like a premise of how I ever understand it. So I heard about the bicameral mind theory in an old documentary in the early 2000s about feral children, where they would go and find like a kid that's been literally raised by wolves for, a couple years or something. And they walk on all fours and they can't talk and they eat raw food and they act very much like a wild animal. And the bicameral mind is almost like saying that consciousness is not innate, that we all take consciousness for granted, but that it's a learned ability that culture upholds. And that if like all of society were to collapse, for example, we might not have the same concept of ego and I and self until, who knows how long goes until someone starts developing it and teaching it. And part of the bicameral mind is that it's language, that once a culture invents language and starts making use of language, that's what actually gives birth to consciousness. And before consciousness, it's almost like the part of you that needs to survive and act and hunt and eat, and then the part of you that like reacts in society are like completely independent and they're almost like autonomous systems. And then it's only with language that people start to develop this. And where it comes in feral children, and this is all very like theoretical, not accepted, but that the feral children, if they're feral beyond a certain point, it's almost like the brain like locks into a certain way of being, and they might never be it might not be possible for them to ever be truly conscious the same way that you would expect.
I mean, yeah, they say that after, this is like kind of a thing, is after 5 years old, you're between 5 and 8, you're solidified. So it depends, right? Like when you find this kid, because they say your personality and your like actual traits of like who you are developed by that point, like solidified by 5 and 8. So between 5 and 8.
And he makes a claim somewhere in this book about like ancient Greece, and that how even like the ancient Greeks, they might not have had the same type of conscious thinking that we did. It was like very rudimentary because all these older cultures, it wasn't just that they had a story that like the god was angry. And that was supposed to like reflect. It might have actually been that every action that happened in the external world was directly perceived to be that like this god was angry, because that was the logic system. It wasn't necessarily that it was a story about this. I don't know what to think of it. Again, it's very highly contested, but it's something that's interesting to think about.
Well, and that's like if you go to other countries and you talk about mythology, we call it mythology, but they call it history, right? So, like, what that's real to them, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's all about what they've been taught, like you say, like, if that's normal for everyone there and that's a thing for everyone there, so, you know, then it's a thing. So, how do you make that change? Same thing with Mormonism, elitism, white supremacyism. Like, I'm sorry, but like, if you go to Idaho, there are certain towns you don't go to still to this day if you're not white. And I don't think that didn't come from Mormons. Like, it's a thing, you know, and will at some point do their kids get it? Like some, my parents were extremely racist, but me and my brother weren't at all. So sometimes it does miss, obviously, or else we would be exactly like them, you know, but we're not. So I don't know.
Well,
I don't know what the deviation is. You know?
Maybe that was literally the thing that got him in trouble. He was just like, "Hey, let's not be racist." And they were like,
Probably.
"You're out of here."
Yeah, no, really. Like I'm telling you, like it was such a big deal then that they actually would have never changed the racism. Brigham Young said, "It will I will never." He said, "The curse on the black people can be removed by the person that put it there, which is God." And so until God comes down here
Wow.
and does it himself, this is how it's going to stay. And it stayed that way until it became widely a problem. You know, this was not like this is 1970. I think it was 78 that they got their priesthood thing. It wasn't that long ago, you know. And I remember when it happened, it was a huge ordeal. And it was something about like penalties and things then of that nature. That was like right when everything was changing with jobs and equal, what is that called? The equal rights movement for jobs and payment and all that stuff. Like everything was changing. And I think that they were coming for them just like polygamy. They were never going to change that, except they started taking their stuff away. And they were like, we're going to just penalize you with money. Well, if you want to get the church's attention, that's a really good way to do it. I'm pretty sure they were going to get sued, you know, by some of these equal rights people because Martin Luther King and all the things happening and all this stuff in this movement. And I think they were like, we can't break away from this. And now, like the new thing, the new racism of this era is the gay stuff. And they came down on it a few years ago, and there was hell to pay. They said that people, their children of gay people couldn't take the sacrament. Everybody lost their minds. And now they're like, just kidding. We pulled it out of the hat that now they can.
Magic hat.
Magical hats. And so, I mean, it is what it is, you know, with that whole thing. And I'm sure it got him in trouble. I'm not doubting that one bit. So
Yeah, it was like I want to go to all over the world and meet with other cultures. They're like, okay, and he's like, and I want to spread a message. Like, okay, yeah, this is sounding good. And he's like, and that
right.
message is that we're all equal, and that was where the problem began.
Yep. Nope.
But
None
but
of
he
that.
was.
Can't be
It
doing that.
sounded like he wanted to spread Mormonism. He wanted to spread the
Right.
dreams of because Joseph Smith, right? It came to him in a dream originally, and that was where he was like, well, if Joey Smith can have a dream, I can have a dream. So
He
I
did
think
say it like that.
and we brought that up on a previous episode where it's like once Joseph Smith says, I read the Bible and the Bible said to like look within or like to talk to God yourself,
Mhm.
like that kind of opens the floodgates because now
But
everyone
he
can
took it
say
back.
that.
You know that he took that back because other people were also getting seer stones, and like Oliver Cowdery was like, "I got a stone too. Look at me." And
Right,
then
but
like
he
all
opened
yeah,
that
and
like
then
the cat's out of the
he
bag.
shut it. He shut it. He was like, "Only me, only the prophet." And so and then
Pulled the
but
ladder
then
up
it
behind him, yeah.
applies to the next prophet, you know, and Brigham Young was racist as ever. And I'm trying to look and see if it was the same time frame, and I'm pretty sure it is. I'm pretty sure he would have been in that time frame of Brigham Young. So like as a child, like when you're actually forming all your what I was saying, like your personality and
You
everything.
mean
I got
they
it.
were yeah, born in 1901.
So, see when Brigham Young's reign ended, the reign of Brigham Young, the most racist president prophet of the church. He was
Well,
like
Brigham
hideous.
Young died in 1877.
Okay, so it still would have been fresh though for the next
He would have
president.
been feeling the echoes of Brigham Young for sure within the Mormon
Yes.
Church.
And I know there were multiple other presidents that were just as bad. So right after that. So
yeah,
it doesn't
less than a generation after Brigham Young was dead.
So they're going to be, I mean, like think of his parents grew up in that. So his parents are bringing that down to him. Like that's his teachings. If you like it, like me with the Kolob thing, it was a thing. And then you tell your kids and they're like, that's no, that's not a thing anymore. Like what? No. And so he was kind of the rebellious kid, you know, like against his parents. I mean, in the sex thing, I'm
what
just
if we're all equal and they're like, shut up, go back to banging your sister?
Yeah, I honestly think, to be honest, if it was over this like incestuous sex or sex in general and over black people, it would definitely be the black people that got him kicked out. I mean, and that's terrible. So
well, because that was the one that was like on the books as being again. And so he had another statement in here that this one is the one that blew my socks off, where I started paying attention more than just speed reading. And it's not like a deep one, but he says that it's, and I guess this is his side piece writing this. So now I'm wondering, like, was she the brains of the operation coming up with these like epiphanies? But it has been observed that ceremonies are the most difficult parts of human culture to change, and therefore represent its most ancient elements. The dream, on the other hand, is the freest and most spontaneous, and therefore the newest type of activity of which a human being is capable. That kind of rocked my world a little bit, because I feel that might be true, that ceremony is like a insight into like the most ancient part of your culture, because ceremony can predate you. This is like that 100 monkey theory, right? Where it's like, my grandpa did it and his grandpa did it and his grandpa did it. Well, why? And it's like, well, I don't know, just because it's the way it's always been done. So that does represent ceremony being this old connection, right?
And on with him, that would fit right in, because think about what he did. Like he went the whole way because he's a missionary. So he absolutely did ceremonies. And I kind of wonder, because he went, where did he go for his mission again?
Hawaii.
He went to Hawaii. I thought he
went
to
Hawaii for at least one of his missions. He went to Hawaii.
So then he went to Netherlands, though, right after that, right? Didn't you say that?
He was a jet setter.
So I wonder if along the way somewhere he read Swedenborg. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, the philosopher.
Yeah, because a lot of how he talks, it's kind of similar-ish. If you mix Mormonism,
how his side piece talk, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, maybe it was her, because she wasn't from America, I don't think. I think she was from somewhere
else. The fact that she wrote I'm going to assume that she wrote the book because of he didn't know how to spell and he couldn't finish it without her help. So a lot of this like really flowery language probably came from her.
It makes you wonder, because he might have had like his bullet points, like in all his bad spelling, and then she just fixed it and put her little 2 cents in there, like for his wife to read later.
And then, so here's the lady that he goes to see, Mr. and Mrs. Hartendorp. And Mrs. Hartendorp says, why is it so important to find out if such people as Negritos are ordinary folks like ourselves? There's only a few thousand of them left, and their culture seems to fade away like the midst of their jungle homes when they're brought into contact with more civilized peoples. And if you do find that they've got the same natural endowment as other races, and learn what kind of mind they build up as they live in their simple society, what then? There's nothing much you can do for them that isn't already being done. This is like the sentiment of like the wife of the guy that she's going to ask money for to go on this expedition. And she's just like, what are you going to waste all this money for?
What's the point? Then he comes back with, oh, by the way, we're all the same.
Well, and honest, like in Stewart's credit, he admits that he also shared the same mentality. Like he went in there thinking this, but spoiler alert for anyone that was going to like dive into this book and read the whole thing. Pygmies and Dream Giants in 1950 something. But he comes back and he does say that like he kind of felt dumb for how much he was assuming, that he just figured there was like these primitive peoples and they were very simple minded and they didn't have any like deeper thoughts. But he comes back with the impression that they've taught themselves psychoanalysis and like hypnosis, and they understand trance states and how to use trance states to like deprogram and heal better than Western people do, because in the West
Well, yeah,
it
because
was like a new.
they're channeling the angels already. They already knew.
Yeah, they like, but and this was like something that, and the way that he describes it, it was like something that we lost through civilization, whereas they kept it the whole time, and since they kept it, they kept using it. But that doesn't. He definitely
Well, of
does not give
course,
the
we
impression that they're
lost it
superior.
with Reformation and Crusades and witchcraft trials. I'm pretty sure that went out the door. Like,
It was kind of
I
beaten
don't
out of us.
yeah. Yeah, I don't think that was gonna continue. And, it makes you wonder, like, how much of this, like you said, this whole thing, this not just him, not this book, also Noon, his part in it, all this is the foundation for CIA, FBI stuff that's gonna
Well,
come.
it 100% is, because coincidentally, this had nothing to do with this episode in this book, but
No.
I've been doing research into a topic that I can't even say the name of, just to
Oh,
make itself
man.
easy on me. But it was dealt with schizophrenia research in the 1930s, and one of these is they sent people to Bali, and there's a video called Trance and Dance in Bali, and it was funded by the 33rd degree Scottish Rite and the Department of like Child Observation, whatever the hell that meant in the 30s. But they sent people to
It's the
Bali
Finders
to re
cult.
I mean, the 30s version of it.
I'm sorry.
And they just recorded like these people in Bali doing these ceremonies where they would like take a mock child away from a mom, and the mom would cry, and the little mock baby would go through all these weird trials and tribulations, and they return to the mom, and then they would dance, but they would dance themselves into frenzies, hence the trance aspect of this. But this is the same time period, the same funding, the same department
Hmm.
as this
Wow.
guy, Stewart, 1930s. It literally lines up like back
Literally
to back.
on my page, I have all this real information, and in the middle, I just have CIA, FBI. No quotes, nothing, just my brain. I was like, no, I don't think so.
So, well, in the 30s, it wouldn't even been the OSS at that point. It would have been
Right.
FBN, Federal Bureau of Narcotics, which coincidentally, all this schizophrenia research, a
Man.
lot of that dovetails into like psychedelics and drugs and mescaline, which is
Oh,
would
yeah.
have been under the purview of the FBN, which is the sort of the FBN's kind of the original ATF,
They're like,
DEA, FBI combined.
what would happen if we slipped this Mickey in this guy's drink? Oh, he jumped out a window. That's what happened. We probably shouldn't do that anymore and not tell people.
Well, Frank Olson was likely pushed out of that window because it
I
was like a
know.
bulletproof glass, like
Oh my
soundproof, like there
gosh.
was no way to open it. So,
But I'm
but yeah,
just saying, yeah,
yeah.
like they did a lot of sketchy stuff at that point where if they found out things worked too good, they were like, kill it, take it all off. It's a schedule one. It helps no one.
Well, if you see any anthropological study that was funded by any like large corporation or academic institution in the 30s through the 50s in America, you can be damn sure that was CIA
Yeah.
funded.
That
Or
was so
if it wasn't CIA funded, it was like they just weren't interested in you. But it would have been if you
yeah.
did something cool.
Right, exactly. Yeah, for sure. And, fun fact for people, I don't know if they know this or if this came up on our show yet, but the FBI and the CIA regularly recruit Mormons for their stuff. And there's one right down the road, 15 miles from me. The FBI is in Farmington, Utah. And I'm telling you, like, it's interesting because they say, oh, it's because they're clean cut and they don't have an accent and they blend and they go on missions and they know other languages. And I get all that. But I also don't think I think it's because we're programmed from birth. And so, yeah, there's only a few of us that go, yeah, I don't think so. I'm not doing that. Most people stay in. So,
Well, most
And
people don't have 30 years of programming to get over.
and for the people that do get kicked out like this guy, most of them go back. My uncle got kicked out of the church 3 times and went back and got
It's
rebaptized into the
like
church
a bad
and went back.
Lifetime movie.
Yeah. And I mean, it's because he's married to a whole bunch of women, but I mean, women were his downfall. So every time he wanted to get with a lady, he just married her and kept getting divorces. And I think at some point they were like, cut it out.
Well, there's a guy that comes in later in this book. I don't think he's Mormon, but he's got quite a sordid tale too. We'll get there. Hold on, I found an actual quote from that bicameral mind theory that can explain it, I think, better than I did.
Perfectly.
So it's based on Jane's. I don't know his first name, but James proposes that consciousness is a learned behavior rooted in language and culture rather than being innate, and he distinguishes consciousness from sensory awareness and cognition. He introduces the concept of a bicameral mind, a non-conscious mentality prevalent in early humanity, and then it says that this hypothesis, Julian Jaynes argued that human ancestors as late as the ancient Greeks did not consider emotions and desires as stemming from their own minds, but as consequences of actions of gods external to themselves. This theory posits the human mind once operated in a state where cognitive function were divided between one part of the brain, which appeared to be speaking, and a second part which listens and obeys, the bicameral mind. So that's kind of wild to me that perhaps, I guess we would never know because we don't have ancient Greeks around to ask directly what was going on in their heads, but that if they
and I'm not channeling, but if you do it, let me know.
I won't. I don't have the time. It sounds like there's a lot of prep work involved.
We could call Juan.
That you could potentially, like, if you were angry, there might have been a very realistic point in time when no one even considered that that was happening because, like, you had a bad thought or that you experienced jealousy or that you were working through some stuff. It was just like, oh, Zeus must be mad because I'm mad, and therefore, you know, like, it must have been liberating if true.
True. Yeah. Who knows?
You could cheat and be like, it wasn't me, it was Zeus.
It was Zeus. Zeus is a horny guy. He was, actually, fun fact. But
I guess the wife could get angry and she could be like, it's not me, it's Hera.
Yeah, exactly. Athena came out to play today.
So, and then the names of the tests that I found were the Porteous Maze test and the Draw a Person test. And that the Draw Person test was also heavily promoted by that Julian Jaynes guy. He got a book called The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. So it almost seems like the bicameral mind theory could have been inspired in part by the type of work that Stewart did.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And also makes sense about the girlfriend coming in and writing things at some point, or it would be called something better than the Draw Person test.
So the guy, he ends up going. He ends up going to this area where he's going to find these Negritos. So he talks the lady and her husband into cutting him a check. And he basically, like, I'm cutting the check right now. This is fascinating. Let's do this. Let's see if these pygmies are real people. And the first person that he meets, he realizes that he has to get a guide. Like, he can't just start walking into these groups of legitimate headhunters, like not a disparaging term, like a literal term of headhunters. And the guy he finds is named Juan. Juan of Baton is what he calls it. So he links up with Juan. And Juan,
we're only laughing because Juan of Baton. Okay, it's good.
Juan Baton. We need to get Juan Baton on for an interview on one-on-one. It'll be one-on-one on Juan of Baton. But this is an interesting concept that you can't go into these areas with more than just one person, because if you go with more than one person, then they assume that you're there to, like, take over,
hurt
or
them.
that it's like you're almost imposing and you're scouting to do something bad to them. So you have to go with
because then
one
it's like an army, or probably reminiscent of such things.
Well, and this is the part that was hard to wrap my head around. But the reason that you go with one person is because when you show up and you've got a white guy and just one guide, everyone and they called them hordes in the book. They didn't call them tribes or villages. They said these hordes of pygmies or these hordes of negritos. So if you ran into a horde and you only had two people, then the horde would assume like, oh, there's no way there's just two of them. These are just the scouts. There must be like an army waiting for them. So we can't attack the scouts because that'll invite the army to come. But if you showed up with more than two people, then they're like, oh, that's the army. Like it's like a 3 or a 5 person squad. Let's take them out because we can easily, you know, take whatever they've got on them. So that was this interest. That's very non-intuitive, but I guess I can see the reasoning. And this,
I mean, yeah.
And Stewart mentions that his guide was basically 100 times more important within like this pygmy region than Stewart was within his community. So even though Stewart is like technically like a rich, you know, foreigner that's got all this knowledge and stuff, he in a social scale is absolutely no one, even with his own community. Whereas this one guy that's working for like $7 a month or something, I did the math, it came out to like $130 a month for him to be his guide, which sounds like not a great amount of pay, but he was happy to do it. And he even worked for free for a month at certain points just because he liked being with Stewart so much, which it's nuts, but it's a really interesting story.
It makes you wonder about the sexuality of other things there, but that, I mean,
Well,
that's just me.
Maybe there was some of that, but one of the things that Stewart realizes over time is that his guide Juan gets it in his head that Stewart's like rich beyond imagination. He assumes that he's got gold and he's got like all this stuff, and Stewart keeps trying to explain to him, and he's like, I don't really have that much money. Like it's a lot for you, but it's not a lot for me.
Right.
And his guide's going around and telling people like, yo, this guy's made out of gold. Like he's got
Oh my God.
everything. And he realizes at a certain point that Juan has got his eye on like a shaman princess in one of these hordes, and that Juan is gonna like slowly, and he does slowly start asking Stewart, he's like, hey Stewart, you should marry that chick. And he's like, I don't want to marry some pygmy chick, like at first, right? He's like, I'm not here to marry anyone. In fact, you told me yourself when we showed up to do this expedition that there were 2 rules. One of the rules is don't bring a gun, because a gun is so valuable that even if they feel bad about it, they'll kill you and take your gun because it's like, you know, gold.
Right.
And the second one is don't mess with any women, because if you mess with women, then they'll take it as jealousy. And apparently these cultures, there's only 2 things that you can justifiably kill someone over. One of them is a blood feud, where if like you kill one of my family, then I can kill one of yours. That's legal. And the other one is adultery. So if you cheat on someone, or if you sleep with another man's wife, then that man is,
they can go, I saw that he could go get his wife back and do whatever he had to do.
And those are the only 2 rules of the society. So he basically tells them like, no guns, no women. Those are the rules. So after they're like in with these groups for a little bit, all of a sudden this guide is like, hey, look at that chick, you know, like you should go and buy her. I in fact, like you don't know this, but I went and talked to her family, and we started negotiating like how much she would cost. And he's like, first they wanted like 500 pesos. And I was like, whoa, you know, we don't have that much. And he's like, but guess what, boss? I got him down to 300. He's like, so you want to go? Like, do you want to go and give him 300? And he's like, I don't have that kind of money. And I wasn't
like,
here. Like, I didn't bring the budget to buy a wife for myself.
A woman.
And he's like, and I don't even want a wife. And then Juan's like, well, you know, you could buy her, and when you leave, you could just give her to me. Like, I'll take care of her for you. And he's like, okay, I see what's going on here, Juan. Like you took this low pay, but really what you wanted is you wanted me to buy you
want
a
wife,
but like through all these weird loopholes and stuff.
That's so funny. Well, I mean, if you're Juan and you can't get a chief's daughter any other way, I guess
you go find yourself a white
chief's
man's
daughter
wife.
is okay.
Yeah,
I don't know, but I mean, you know, the status alone, he probably didn't care, you know.
And I like too the way that he was trying to get out of it, because he knew about these customs, and he was like, well, we couldn't do that because she would be my wife and you would be sleeping with her. So that means that like I would have to kill you, right? Like that isn't that. And he was like, no, because you're white, and I'll convert to Christianity, and all Christians are brothers. and therefore like it
You can
wouldn't be a thing
hear me.
anymore
Oh
because
my
we're
god.
all in the same group. And I could just imagine Stewart's like, damn it, he's got me on that one, you know.
He's
Like,
good at this. He's
he's
good at this.
he's been putting
That's
this one together for a while.
that's where he formulated his hypothesis that we are all equal. He's like, he's smart. I don't know. I can't get out of it.
Well, and he had he never even linked this to the Mormonism, but the concept that these pygmy tribes or these negritos, that they had a concept of blood feud, and the blood feud, it wasn't just that you were allowed to take someone out if they took out someone in your family, but it was that their god would be offended if you didn't. In fact, the way that he describes
Boy.
this, Stewart does, is that like if I were to take out someone in your family, God would actually be madder at you for not having retribution for that than he would be at me for doing it in the first place, which is wild. But
Wow.
Stewart really beats in over all the chapters in this book that that's such a core tenet of this culture that can't be ignored, and that's almost the basis for everything, is kind of around this aspect that like their God demands vengeance and demands warfare. And if you don't give him his vengeance and his warfare, then he gets mad at you. And then people come after you with even more of it.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
at a certain point, Stewart, again, paraphrasing, he's kind of like, Juan, like, you're going to give up like your whole culture and your religion and everything. And he's like, oh, hell yeah. Like, your God's loving. Like, our God sucks. Like, our God wants us to fight.
He's like, I'm
constantly.
good. I'm
He's
good.
like,
Yeah.
I'm all in, bro. Like, tell me where to sign
Get a
up. I
wife.
get a
You're my
wife. I get 2
brother.
brothers. Yeah.
He's like, no, I'm good. Go ahead. Go ahead.
This sounds like a way cooler wand than the one that we know.
Oh, poor Juan. You know him better than me.
So
He
this is
doesn't
the
talk.
exact this is the exact quote from Juan in the book, Juan of Baton. And he says, guns and women are the things Negritos are the most likely to kill you for. To get hold of a gun and
Ugh.
ammunition, they would risk their lives and any time and kill anyone outside their local group. If a man falls in love with your woman, even a man of your own group, one of your bloodkin, he may commit adultery with her. If you find out about it, you have to kill him, even if you don't want to, because Talandian, the Negrito high god who lives inside the earth, doesn't like adultery. If he gets mad, he may destroy everyone. The earthworms are his messengers. That's why you must never sneer at them, why you must always thank them for allowing you to put them on your hook when you fish with them. If Talandian gets angry, he turns the earth over and makes the trees upside down. And then he talks about how like the earthworms will come out of the earth and look like they're like unrestful, and that means that somebody's wife is cheating on them somewhere. That's like the concept of these worms coming out.
Oh
And then
boy.
they say that when the Negritos are hungry, they eat monkeys. But that you can never tell when the monkeys are going to tattle because they tell everything they know to Talandian. The lowlanders stay in one place and the officials make them pay taxes and go to school. Negritos are not that stupid. They travel around so the officials can't find them, but the monkeys are wise. Monkeys don't talk to officials. They're free to come and go and steal wives as much as they like. You better not make fun of the monkeys if you want to keep in well with the Talandian. And I couldn't tell, is he talking about
Wow.
real monkeys here, or was this like a veiled reference to
Like a
something?
reference. That sounds weird because steal wives. Like, I mean, maybe that's where, like, if they got sick of their wife because he couldn't have a divorce or adultery, maybe the monkey came and stole their wife.
It turns into
And
Jungle Book.
really, she just got pushed in the water and she didn't come back. I don't know. It sounds sketchy either way. Whatever he's referring to, that sounds like a lot. And then let alone the worms are tattling on you, like you can't do anything. That sounds worse than Mormonism.
Well, he gets scared a few times because it's like these weird rules that he doesn't realize. Like, imagine if you're just hanging out in someone's, house, or like you go outside and where you're standing, like worms start coming up out of the ground, and it's
Oh,
like, how dare you sleep with
oh
my wife? And you're
no.
like, what are you talking about? Like,
What?
it just rained. The worms are here. And
Oh
that was a
man.
very real threat constantly throughout this book, where something would
Yeah.
happen outside of his control. And he's like, uh-oh, these pygmies are going to think that I did that, and they're going to kill
This
me.
sounds like a bad time with the
Yeah.
malaria and the monkey worms and all the things. It doesn't sound fun.
And ringworm,
no.
like everyone's got ringworm and stuff, and they've got
And
like weird.
scabies.
Yeah, they've
Scabies.
and
Ugh.
did you read there was a part where so I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but like once he gets like inside the tribe and they accept him, he's in the horde and he's like one of them almost for a while. And he's hanging out with this guy and they've got these like women in their laps and it sounds like it's a very like casual hookup culture and like these pygmies. And so they're watching a fire and the guy next to him is picking the girl's head in front of him and finding lice and eating the lice.
Ah,
And he
no,
says
no.
that he asked the guy half like repulsed but also half completely fascinated, like why are you eating those lice off of her head? And the guy,
Ew.
he describes it and he says like it's like when you love someone so much that you can't bear to think that there's some parts of them that won't be part of you. So when you eat the lice and drink the blood of like your partner,
Ew.
it's like a way of honoring them. Like I can't bear to not have more of you as part of me,
Yeah.
which is kind of like a Machine Gun Kelly, Megan Fox kind of thing, right? Or like a Billy Bob Thornton, Angelina Jolie, depending on your generation.
Ew. No.
You
Carrying the
wouldn't eat
blood
lice
around.
off of your husband's head?
Definitely not. No. So bad. Ugh. Sounds not good.
And he
Ugh.
so going back to the blood feud thing, this is the quote where he asks Juan and he says, "Doesn't Talandian get mad if you kill a man for committing adultery?" And Juan responds, "No, Talandian doesn't mind if you kill people. He only gets mad if you don't kill them to fulfill a blood feud. If you killed someone in my group, that would not make Talandian angry at you, but he would be very mad at one of us if we did not kill you in return to avenge his death. Letting you live would be a violation of blood feud. I will not get a wife and take her my wife, would no longer have a husband. You as a white," and this is where like the weird like logic comes in. So he says, "You as a white man wouldn't have to worry in the southern groups if you took a wife, because all the negritos down this way are told by Lucas, who worked for the United States Army, that all white men are Christians. So becoming a Christian makes you a blood brother with everyone else who is a Christian. Therefore, for them to avenge your death would make the blood feud apply to all white men and Filipino Christians if you were to be killed." So basically, he's telling them that like you're as long as you're a white dude, you're safe in the south regions of these pygmies because they're worried that if they kill you, then like Christians also adhere to blood feud, which we don't, right? But like they think that everyone adheres to blood feud. So if you kill a white guy, that means all the white people on the planet are going to come and avenge his death. So at least the southern cultures, like white people were untouchable. That's the premise that I get.
Wow. So they could do whatever they want?
No, and this is what I was thinking about blood feud. Like that almost sounds like the Mormon angle of that, like God allows killing if it's for very specific purposes, and it's almost like you have to do it. That's kind of the explanation given. It's not like I didn't choose to do this, like my religion requires me to do this, so therefore
Wow.
it's not bad, right? Or do I have that wrong with
So
like Mormon
no,
blood?
I think no, I mean, if the religion thing, that's a whole like rabbit hole with the Mormons because they deny it so much. They're always like, oh, well, but Brigham Young said, if you love your neighbor and he commits a sin, love him enough to kill him. And so, but then the church will say, no, no, that's not real. And so where the truth lies, we do not know. But I do know there's actual blood atonement cases that have been documented. And so hard to know, but I also know this. There's a second anointing that at some point, if you get the second anointing, you can do whatever you want. And no sin is held against you
Yeah,
because
that's
you're
the cheat
perfect.
code. You get unlimited ammo and unlimited guns and unlimited lives.
Yeah, you get all the things. Yeah. And so I don't know when that like, I mean, they deny that that still happens, but it does. It still happens. That does. Now the blood atoning thing after the murders, the Lafferty murders kind of blew that up, and they already were kind of like, oh, we didn't have anything to do. That's just crazy people. But they took out the sign like this that the OTO does and everything. And they took it out 2 years later. Do I think that was related? I do. I mean, I spoke to the survivor husband of that situation. I'm trying to get him to come on an interview, but he thinks there's probably a relation there as well. And so, because they took out that whole slicing throat for the blood atonement thing. So I don't know where
I assume 100 years ago, it might not have been as under wraps. Like if you knew about blood atonement 100 years ago in 1930, it might not be like, no, that doesn't exist. It would.
Right. Because they had the Danites, and that was a whole thing, and the Brighamites, and that was a real thing. That was like, they had their people to go take people out, and they had their own militia and all this stuff. So around that earlier time, so like we were talking about, that next generation would have known about that. So whether it was still active at that time, I don't know. I know there's documented cases closer to the 1900s where they have actual names and places of people that were blood atoned. And one dude was like just committing adultery, which I'm not saying like that's not serious, but let's be real. I mean, the polygamy thing, I was like, he should have just married her. I don't know what happened there. But like he knew about it. It was called the Anderson case out of Cedar City. And his wife like made his clothes and he put them on and he went out and they dug his grave. He probably helped. And then he just got on his knees and I'm like, okay, that's not weird at all. I mean, but like when it became taboo, I'm not sure. Like when it became so unheard of, right? Like that never happened when they started doing MK Ultra. I don't know, and I mean, they still were doing the sign until the 1980s, of you will spill your
I
pals.
assume that a lot of this dovetails with the internet. Like once it's like, oh crap, someone can post this and someone across the country can read it. All right, we need to start playing cleanup here.
Yep, I think probably so. I know the internet was the cause of many people leaving the church in flocks, like in general, let alone the murders that I mentioned under the Banner of Heaven book. He wrote a whole book about the murders, then it blew up. That was bad PR. Like there was a lot that went into that. And do you know what's funny? And you probably know this, is the Masons followed. They no longer did certain things. I'll just say certain things as well. But guess who led the Mormon church? So who's running who? I do not know. Maybe that's,
well, I think it was a lot of that probably had to do with the Morgan affair and like the monitors that were coming out that explained all the secret handshakes.
Well, this didn't end until the 80s. This didn't end until the 1980 something. I'm talking late.
But it seemed like Mormons were kept more in bubbles than other groups. Like Mason didn't mean a whole lot other than you join this group. But if you say Mormon, that almost dictates where you went to school, who your friends are, who your family is, like
where you're from. People assume.
All of that.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. So kind of interesting, but I mean, when it kind of died out and became fake, like Kolob, I don't know, because now they say it never happened and that only crazy people did it. I'm like, that's not true, because there was a whole army of these people that you guys fully endorsed, whether or not, I mean, they beat people and killed people and took their cattle, and it was all authorized like that.
Maybe we do an entire episode on just Kolob, because I know that's a high point of contention.
Kolob and the Danites, I think the Danites and the Brighamites and the second anointing is hugely important to understand Mormonism, because you stand back and go, well, they would never do that because they're against ABC and that's against, this, that, and the other. And they're, LDS. So they're good, upstanding people. No. There's little rules that, rules for thee and not for me. So that's like critical in understanding what the heck, like, why can he go kill people and take the cattle and bring it back? And even when he brought him back, he had a bunch of money from the guy, and they killed this guy. And then they were like, I can't remember the name, but it's, I'll look it up. I've got it all written down, but it's one of the parties.
That's all new to me. That would all be a big learning experience.
This one's big. And then when he asked if he could keep some of the money because he was kind of broke, the church was like, no. But they didn't authorize it, but they sure wanted the money from it. And it was all about selling cattle to the government. actually, I think it was the Fancher party, but I don't want to misquote. I have it all written down. So I don't want to mess it up in case
All right. Well,
Mormons. I said
yeah,
I
they're
don't
gonna
know.
come after you if you like just
Don't
like
at
forget
me.
the dot and
Yeah.
I, right?
I have a whole bunch of stuff written down for it. So another
All right,
day.
here
Yeah.
so we got into him getting there, and then he finally starts to get to work doing like this dream harvesting. So Juan is telling him all the rules of interacting with these peoples that he's going to end up talking to. So he says that both Perez and Bayer warn me I must make no move among these people, which looks like black magic. In giving me medicine, the health officer had cautioned me against treating anyone who was seriously ill. He said, if someone's about to die when you treat him and your medicine doesn't save him, the Negritos will blame you for his death and won't let you do anything for anyone else. It's happened before, and that's one reason they still have scabies, ringworm, and other infections. They won't let us take care of them. And this is a interesting idea that you show up and you can't help anyone that looks like they're about to die because you'll get blamed for it. So it's better to just not help them at all, because even if you
Look
try and help
away.
them
Look
and it
away.
doesn't work, yeah, no one will believe you that you
Yeah.
can help them just because you couldn't save like 100-year-old grandma that hasn't eaten for a week, right? So now you can't treat someone else's
Right.
ringworm.
Oh
It's
my
like I
gosh.
understand the logic, but it must have been really frustrating as he's
I would have been like,
out.
see this stuff, this may or may not help you. And if you put it on, that's up to you. But I'm not telling you to do any of that.
Right, but he was here
Yeah.
not necessarily to help people. He just wanted to get their dreams.
Right.
That was
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
100% the
That was the
reason that he
purpose.
came here.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and Noon, I think, was the one, like you were saying, that really was the one that did most of the stuff, but he was just kind of on his coattails in a way.
Well,
So,
Stewart did the
but
hypnosis part, and that was
yeah.
the first thing that he did. So some guy shows up and says that he's got a headache. So since they aren't receptive immediately to drugs, and because he doesn't even know what the issue is, he basically puts this guy into a hypnotic state, and he tells the guy to close his eyes, and then he's basically like really basic hypnosis where he says, okay, your eyes are going to feel like they're so heavy, like they're shut together, they're locked together. You won't even be able to open them if you try. And I guess this power suggestion is working on the guy, because the guy starts trying to open his eyes and freaks out and he starts screaming.
Oh
And now
man.
all the other people are like, "Oh my god, he put like he is using black
He did the
magic.
black
Now this
magic.
guy
Yep.
can't open his eyes." So now he's freaking out and he's like, "Oh crap, I've done something bad here." So then this is when
Oh
he
boy.
brings up the feeble-minded Mormon children, and he's like, "Okay, I can't say try and open your eyes, you won't be able to, and I can't say your eyes are not going to be able to open." You say, now imagine if you try to open, like he starts flowering it, and I guess
Mhm.
that works, and it gets the people off of his trail for a short amount of time, but he keeps like towing that line over and over again.
Jeez. Well, and funny enough, did you hear what happened to Noon, his partner, after all this happened?
No,
You heard
after the
this?
book, you mean?
Yeah. So after they got back, he disappeared without a trace after the war with communists.
And that's the end.
So
That's the end of Noon.
yeah, like never, no one heard from him ever again without a trace. Don't you think that's weird?
I mean, not really. I mean, again,
I mean,
1930s. These guys are
FBI,
explorers.
like
They're
I'm
meeting
just
up with
saying,
headhunters.
maybe he made it out. He got out and everything, but like after the
Right, but I'm
war,
just saying, like in a Final
yeah,
Destination way, he tempted fate so many times that like it was
right.
gonna come and get him at some point.
I felt like it was CIA, FBI related because it was without a trace. Literally, the words disappeared without a trace, and I'm like, he knew too much. They wanted that to be shut down.
Or it would have
But
been, yeah, FBN or OSS or something at that
yes,
point.
yes, yeah. I mean, all of this is like so much information, and I guess did you read too that he said that he had done work with the Indians before he came out too, like the
Yeah,
Native
and he would
Americans.
like do some of like the Indian chanting and dancing to
Mhm.
impress
Yep.
these guys.
But that's such a fine line. What if you did the wrong dance and back to black magic again?
Well, this is how he gets out of raising suspicion at like cursing this guy with the closed eyes. So once he realizes the guy's freaking out and the people around him are freaking out, he has to de-escalate the situation a little bit. And I guess he had been told by Juan that these people thought in terms of colors, so that like a certain type of pain or any kind of feeling they were going through, they could identify with color. So he uses this to sort of like detract. And he said that um tell the man to let his eyes go to sleep again so we can help and remove the cause of the headache. And as he did, he said, now go deeper into the sleep world and into your past and discover the color of your headache. And he mentions that both in Utah and in Hawaii, I had found that looking at an imaginary color or image somewhat had the effect of deepening the agreement trance as looking
Mhm.
at a whirling disc had in hypnosis. So this was like, instead of doing the pocket watch, that you see in the cartoons, if
Mhm.
you just tell someone, imagine the color of what you're feeling now, that itself sends someone deeper into a trance. So the guy
Which
identifies it. He says that it's purple. As soon as the guy says it's purple, Juan goes, "Oh, he's got malaria." Like somehow Juan is like in the peanut gallery, and he's
he's
like,
like,
"Oh, he's
oh, I know
feeling."
that
Yeah.
one.
But he's right, and he says that they all have it as children, but they get over it around the age 5 or 6, when they start
Mm.
putting on loincloths. I don't know how accurate that is. Do you just grow out of malaria at a certain point? But
I mean, I guess, yeah, you could get immune to
can you?
possible
Well, I guess
reinfection.
so, because
I
that's
mean,
what they, yeah, you would get like a malaria.
mhm.
I won't even say the word, but yeah, you would get a malaria
Yeah,
thing. So
yeah.
he
Natural
describes
one.
this.
Yeah.
But then he doesn't say that it's malaria anymore. Now he says it's like a malaria demon that's inside of him, and then he
Mm.
has to fight it. So this guy is in this deep trance state, and he visualizes the color, and then all of a sudden, the color turns into like an actual entity in his mind. So the Stewart doesn't know what to make out of this, and he's kind of like, all right, let's get him out of this trance state. But now Juan and everyone else around him is saying, no, you can't. Like, once you go into
Mm.
your spirit cave, and this is what they referred to it, you can't leave the spirit cave until you've achieved victory. So
Oh
this is
boy.
what's blowing Stewart's mind, where he's like, wow, this is way more complicated than I thought. Like, this is that sophistication that we were bypassing, but these guys actually understand the concept of like going within and trying to battle
And
something,
fighting.
and then you're like all within your mind in like a dream. You got to fight your demons in a dream, and then only after you fight them in the dream can you come back out into the real world, and it'll have some physiological effect on you. And that's pretty
Don't you find
advanced.
it fascinating that they dealt with color with revelation of the method and mental gymnastics with color and things? Like, that's very fascinating to me about the color. I hadn't heard that. And so I'm like, I mean, that's something that they do all the time,
Well,
with
and
color.
synesthesia is
Mhm.
where people
Mhm.
report seeing certain types of sound. Like if they hear a certain
Yeah.
frequency, they'll see a certain color. So people that don't have synesthesia, if you get them to try and do that, it's kind of forcing you to create new neural pathways, which just change it, like opens your mind up to a different way of thinking, which sometimes can be that pattern breaker that'll snap you out of whatever thing that you're in. If it's like a depression, or it's like some kind of a rut, or if you're one of those Greek dudes that just thought you kept getting angry because Zeus was walking by, like if you tell them to imagine like how a color made them feel or vice versa, that almost can start getting their mind open. I guess that would be like, dosing
I
someone
mean,
with some acid or
yeah.
something.
Well, and fun fact, so in the Jeffs clan, just Warren Jeffs, like the most fundamentalists, they aren't allowed to have the color red anywhere. They don't wear red. They are not supposed to have anything but pastel colors or like neutral colors like browns and stuff. Like, they cannot wear red.
What if
Red
you get like
is
a paper cut?
uh you can't wear it. You better go clean it up, because it's what if you had red hair? I don't know. But
Yeah, that would suck.
but fun fact, when they arrested Warren Jeffs, guess what he was in? A red car with red on. And it really ticked off a lot of the people.
Or could he just be like, no, I'm not Warm Jeff. See,
Yeah,
he wouldn't be
'cause
wearing
I'm wearing
red.
red.
Like, I can't
Yeah.
possibly. It's like, what was Prince
It's a
Andrew?
whole
He's like, no, that
thing.
couldn't have been me. I don't sweat. That guy's got sweat on his spits. I don't sweat.
Yeah, that's exactly that. I mean, he tried to play it off like that, like, oh, I was trying to blend in and so they wouldn't catch me and blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, a lot of people were really mad about that. So kind of funny in a way, but weird because the relation to color and like mental and all of that makes you wonder. Does it
Let's
open
see. There was
pathways?
another story that he had in here about how he almost died. So at a certain point, he realizes that in order to get the favor of all the people and to get them all congregate, because right now he's having to like trek from horde to horde. Again, that's what he calls them, are these hordes. And it's
Mhm.
very inconvenient for someone that works best when he's laying down, right? And he's like doesn't want to
Yes.
work up too much of a sweat. So they decide, let's throw a big feast. And if you throw a feast, then now all the neighboring hordes will come together, and now they're all in one place, and that'll make it easier to do our mental tests and the maze tests and all this on all the kids and all the adults. So they throw
Ah,
this big party, and in preparation for this party, it's not like Stewart is like the event organizer, right? He's just like, hey, we should
right.
throw a feast.
He's
I'll
like,
help
okay,
you guys
yeah,
do it.
let's do it.
Like, you
Yeah.
guys do your thing. So they start doing their thing, and a bunch of the elders decide to clear out a whole area of the jungle, so that they've got space to, have people and put fires.
Right.
Like, you're clearing out an area. So they get through that, and he says that like they get like 90% of the way done. And then that night, one of the guys that was clearing out the forest has a bad dream where
Oh
their
no.
lead god tells him that he's mad that they cleared out this forest. So in the morning, everyone's grumpy,
He's
and
the
he's not,
tree hugger.
and basically it's like now he's being blamed for angering their
Oh
god,
my.
even though he didn't tell them to clear that out, but they were clearing it out because it was on his behalf, which
Oh my
angered the
gosh.
god. And now he's like, crap, I don't even know what I
I
did. Like,
can't even win. I can't win with these people.
well, he like visited them in a dream, and now they're angry. It's
Oh,
every once in a while, but like my
oh
girlfriend will
man.
wake up and be like, I had a dream that
Yeah,
you were sleeping with
you
someone else
cheated.
last night, and then
Yep.
it's like you're mad at me in real life over something that
Yeah,
happened in a dream, but
like this isn't real. Yeah.
but this is happening, and they're like, and we might kill you because of this, because we're
Oh
literal
man.
headhunters, and this is what we do.
Oh.
So he has to walk them back from this again by some crafty Mormon magic work. And this culminates in this chick, Olan, I think is her name, and this is the one that Juan's had his eye on the whole time, and this is where he starts explaining this whole
Ah.
process of like, hey, you can buy her, but then when you leave, if you don't bring her with you, you can give her to me, and then she'll be my wife. And he starts explaining how all this works, and he's like, isn't that he's trying to figure out the morality of it, and how this, because you just
Right.
told
How
me
it's gonna
that
play off.
adultery is like worthy of being killed over, and everyone's fine with that, but yet you're asking me to just leave without my wife, give her to you, no divorce. And this
He's
is
like,
where Juan,
no, thank you.
well, he's
Yeah.
like, well, I'll convert to Christianity, and then it's all
Yeah.
good, right? Like, then we can do
So
adultery.
funny.
Juan
Yeah.
doesn't get it 100%, but it's like you won't die over it, so I guess that's
I
better.
mean, yeah, that's better. It's definitely better. Oh my gosh, this guy. And then who knows how much of it is like real, or like he put more into it, right? I
Well,
think it would be awesome to have Juan's diary. I
well,
want
Juan
Juan's
makes
diary.
a weird comment to Stewart, and Stewart was like, he makes a note in this book. So Juan, Juan is describing to him about like the American mating ritual. And Stewart's like, go on, tell me more. Like, as an American, please tell me what the mating ritual is. And he's like, well, okay. Well, so when you're courting a girl, you got to give her a pair of panties, and then she'll wear the panties, and then she'll give them back to you, and then you'll put them under your pillow and you'll sleep on them. And he's
What?
looking at this guy like, that's not an American
That's
thing. I don't
not
know where you
it.
got this. That's not
It
American.
might be French. I
Well,
mean,
it's a Spanish. He mentions
I
that
knew
in
it
the
was
little
close.
footnote,
Yeah.
that this actually is a custom, but it has nothing to do with America. But because this is like a Filipino isolated area, it's just like whoever is Christian and comes through as a missionary, it's like, oh, Americans, oh, you're Christian, oh, Americans, if you speak English, I
Oh
guess.
boy.
So he's got this weird like mishmash of what he thinks American culture is, and he ends up successfully negotiating this girl to actually she does become his wife. Like they go through the
So
process
funny.
exactly as Juan describes it, and he sleeps with her. And he describes sleeping with her and like all
Oh
this.
boy.
And the Juan tells her he's like, I'm not part of this culture, so how does this work? Like she's making eyes at me. Like I've kind of paid this dowry, so obviously something's gonna happen, but how do I know? And Juan's like, dude, just sit there, don't move. And if she takes off your loincloth, you can do anything you want. And he's like, okay. So, but then he writes in the next section, he's like, well, it turned out Juan wasn't right. Like, even after she takes off the loincloth, you can't do anything you want. It's more like you can do anything that she wants you to do as long as it prolongs the experience. So he's a little bit disappointed that he thought he was just going to be able to call the shots, and then it wasn't
And then
necessarily like
she's the
that.
boss.
But that implies that, like, yeah, so he actually has this like quasi marriage with one of these pygmy women,
So funny.
consummates the marriage, and then ends up dropping her off with Juan. And then he meets another
Bye-bye.
white guy in his travels, and he's like, oh my god, another white guy, thank god, let's talk about how weird this is. And the other white guy is like, oh no, this is actually pretty dope the way that this works. See, how it works is that you get the wife, and she sticks, you pay the dowry and you do all these things, but after a while she starts getting bitter and she'll start like nagging
Oh.
you, and at a certain point you won't want to take it anymore, and all you do is you send her back home to her family with like a horse and some gold, like just a little bit of money. And that's the accepted version of this culture, is that
Oh.
once like they fall out of love, they'll start nagging each other, they break up, the man basically buys his way out of the marriage, sends her back to the family, and now she's got money to provide to her family, and she's back out on the market, and you can kind of keep repeating this process until
Oh boy.
something just
This is
sticks.
how alimony came about, I feel.
It came from the Pygmies.
I mean, it sounds like that. I feel like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, better than getting your head chopped off or whatever they were going to do to him, but
I mean, it
you know.
sounds very transactional, and it's almost like, oh no, this is the way things are done. Which I
Well,
don't
it
know.
doesn't sound stupid or backward, to be honest. I mean,
Well, so the guy mentions another thing too, and I have to bring this one up. This one blew my mind, and you're gonna hear
you're
about
already
this again
laughing,
on,
so
yeah,
it's
I'm already
funny.
laughing.
Ah!
But he brings them, and he sees these ladies that are like basically serving him and his friend. And I'm just imagining, like, he's at like the Batman dining hall, and he's got all these like black pygmy servants that just keep bringing food, but they're also his wives and his like harem. And he's talking to the guy, and he's like, wow, they're really quiet. Like, usually when we're eating, like, it's a bunch of chatty Cathy's up in here, like you're just hearing, ba 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 ba. And he's like, wow, like what is it that they're all being quiet? And he's like, my friend, we found the ultimate cheat code. So they designed what they call a golden mouth, and a golden mouth was like a jewelry that was made out of gold that you would put in your mouth, and you'd have to bite down on to keep it in place. And it was this sign of like high stature. So once they would give these women a gold mouth, it's not like it's not like strapped to them or anything. It's like almost like a mouth guard, right? But the mouth guard
Okay.
would fall out if you open your mouth. So the women, they want to look, like they're high society, and they want to show off this like golden jewelry, but the only way they can do that is by keeping their mouth closed to keep the gold in. So that was, and he was like, it's fucking great. They love the
And no one
gold.
could see
I
it.
love the
Yeah, no one.
silence. Like, everyone wins.
That's so. But then she never talks again.
Right. I mean, it sounds like there might be a market for these out there, but there might be a cultural buy-in issue where, like,
Oh,
because
that's so funny.
and it's wild because like the guy is clearly like, this is great. They all shut up. They don't talk, and they're happy about it. And the ladies are there like, no, we like it. It's really nice gold. It's got,
You
like
can't
gems in
even
it.
see it though. Like you wouldn't even be able to smile, like anything. They have no idea, I guess. How funny. Oh my gosh.
So that
No,
blew my mind.
I'm sure that would be something that men would definitely try to get reinstated in this day and age if it was possible.
Like, oh,
Maybe that's
hon,
what
you want
piercings
that
are
new
for.
diamond
Yeah.
gold mouth?
Eh, zip it up. Let me put it on. Give
And
me
then
a
if you
horse.
open your mouth to talk and it falls out, you're like, oh, you're not getting that one back.
It's the first grill. Like, it's a
Yeah.
grill. I mean, it's just not you can't open your mouth, though, and show anybody, so it doesn't sound as fun.
And then I had one other note here that was just noting his like frustration with some of this, because he's realizing, wow, these people are like incredibly advanced. They understand all this introspection, and they have, and the part that I guess that I buried the lead on a little bit here is his fascination is that there was this rumor that these people, there's about 12,000 of them in total estimated in 1930, that all like these different pygmy hordes, but that 12,000 people for more than 2 centuries lived without any major warfare. Like they basically lived in
Wow.
complete harmony and peace despite these little minor blood feuds, but that those blood feuds is what kind of kept the peace, almost like the Purge movie, right? Like because they
It's
had
their
this.
one day a year.
Yeah,
Well, their
they,
one, thing, whatever, problem.
and that's the way they get to like sort of express any frustration is through these very
How
simple rules
funny.
of blood feud and of like incest and all these other
Oh my
aspects of their
gosh.
culture. But he's like, okay, so you're a little bit more advanced than I gave you credit for, but there's so many of you starving and being malnourished. And he goes
Right.
to the ceremony called the rice, what the hell was it called? I've got it written down somewhere. The rice increasing ceremony. So this whole entire horde only plants one single plot of rice every year, and they all get together to harvest it, even though the size of the horde keeps growing. So, as you might
Oh,
imagine,
wow.
as the horde grows and the crop stays the same size, people start going without food, and now it's causing all sorts of issues, fatalities and malnutrition and so on. And he basically asked him, he's like, why don't you guys just, plant 2 plots of rice? Like that would solve the
Mhm.
problem. Like you
Yeah.
got all this land, just plant more. And that's another faux pas, because this rice increasing ceremony is basically they owe it. And this is goes back to that, like, we've always done it because my great granddaddy always
Right.
did it, and that's how they always did it. So the concept is you plant one plot of rice, and then at the end of the year before you harvest it, you pray to God and ask God that as you harvest it, it
Oh.
multiplies and it like becomes more than what it really was. So as you might imagine, they harvest it and it's like, oh crap, there's actually not enough here to feed everyone. So
Oh,
he
no.
offers 2 suggestions. One is that plant more, and they're like, we can't plant more. That would be an insult to our God, because it's like saying we don't trust him to be plentiful for us. So Stewart's like, well, that's stupid. Okay, well, why don't you count the rice first? Why don't you go and inspect it before you harvest it, and then you'll know if like you were shorting yourselves first before you even gave God a chance to multiply it for you. And they're also saying like, no, 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 that's also insulting God. That's like saying you don't trust that, so he's like,
Mm.
I don't know how to help you guys. Like, you're not allowed to count your rice, and you're not even allowed to plant more rice. So you're just going to keep
So,
going without
yeah.
food. There's nothing to do about
Well,
it.
it sounds like that's how they keep their, population in check, right?
Yeah,
That's,
well, that and the ringworm and the scabies and the
ugh,
lice. Yeah.
yeah. Ugh. Well, they're
So
eating
so
that,
he
so,
kind of
yeah.
wraps it up around there. Like there's some more like notes and little excursions he goes on, but that's the impression that I get, is that he kind of proves his theory that he was trying to prove, that the dreams that he was collecting and like the internal like journeys that these guys were going on and like fighting off demons in their dreams, that was as advanced as anything that Western culture had brought through like psychology, but that
Wild.
they definitely were not advanced in terms of anything else, agriculture, nutrition,
Right.
animal husbandry, like none of that existed in these groups. So that was his takeaway, and he brings it back, and yeah, that
And
was
it becomes the new age movement, y'all. Just so you know, it doesn't immediately, but it is a huge part of it. Like, it's crazy later with the whole, like, in your dreams and fighting things and blah, 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 and it becomes a integral part of it. It's wild, and
right.
lucid
Lucid
dreaming. Yeah.
dreaming, astral projection, new age
Yeah.
dream theory came from a guy that was so obsessed with Mormon dreams that kicked out of the Mormon church because of how deep, how hard in the paint he went with this. But
Can't go hard in the paint. Yeah.
my understanding is that he was always a Mormon. Even if he left or
Yeah.
they kicked him out, he never left the Mormon
He
mentality.
believed it. Yeah. From what I saw, he believed it and spoke of it that way. So weird. I mean,
I gotta
for
say,
him.
this is one pushes me closer to becoming Mormon again. Heidi.
No.
We're gonna
You don't
have
want to
to
do it.
figure out how to push me back over on the other edge again.
Oh, remember about them wives. You got to get married. Just remember that one.
Well, the other guy said he had, like over 30 wives in all these different countries and area codes and stuff. Like that
30's
was
okay. 30's okay, but you got to have at least one. You got to get married.
That's right.
Get your girlfriend over here. No, don't. I don't want you to be a Mormon. It's rough. Yeah. I don't know. You're used to rules. Maybe you'd like it.
No, I don't think I would
What?
like. You know what? I like the lore. Like I would love to
Yeah.
read about it and be able to ask questions, but I don't want to
You
have
can't
to
ask
dress
these
up and
questions
go to
anymore.
church.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, it's all gone now. Like all of the fascinating parts they've taken away, right? Like
Well,
you
that's
don't
why
get
you're
your own
here. You're here
planet.
so
Yeah,
we can promote
we're
all the cool parts
trying.
again.
Hopefully, I'm telling enough things about this that is weird that some people are like, "Oh, didn't know that." It's hard sometimes too when I'm talking to people, and then I tell people something like this happened with my brother-in-law who was in the Warren Jeffs clan and everything, and then I was like, you do know, he's like, oh, I still believe in Mormonism, and I'm like, you do know that he's like their current president is an Allen Key member and a Skull and Bones member, and you could just see the color drain, like, and sometimes I forget that you can't do that to people. You can't push them down the rabbit hole. You have to lead them down the rabbit hole because he wasn't ready.
I don't understand how that works. I don't understand how you could be Skull and Bones and Mormon because some of the
Yeah.
things they do in Skull and
I
Bones are
know.
very incompatible.
I don't know, but he is, yeah. Skull and Bones and Allen Key. It's actually, if you Google it, it'll come right up. But
And I
yeah,
wonder
he's
too
a doctor. He's a surgeon, so it makes sense. I mean,
if you have to take oaths for all those different clubs and groups. Like, is there a guide on which oath takes priority over the other oaths, or
I
is that up to
know.
the individual? Or is there like a
Not.
like if you're Skull and Bones and then you become Mormon, does like another Skull and Bones Mormon guy pull you aside and he's like, "Hey, by the way, the Skull and Bones."
You got to have this first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, I know that they absolutely say Mormons can be Masons, Masons can be Mormons. There's no issue with it whatsoever. So I imagine there's some loopholes. That's my guess. That's my best guess. But obviously not dreaming and talking about equality because you get kicked out. You can come back. I'll take you back. They would have took him back. If he would have went back and been like, JK, they would have let him get rebaptized.
I mean, he'd just be like, I just converted like 12,000
Yeah.
pygmies to Mormonism. They don't know it yet, but
Exactly.
we're going to baptize the hell out of these people.
They did it anyway. They did it without them. He just wrote all their names down.
Do you
Took
can,
it to
can
the-
they baptize more pygmies at a time because they're smaller, or does that not?
I mean,
factor
no, it's got to be one per name. Then you got to do the dunk, and then again, and then
in?
again.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can't fit
Yeah.
like more pygmies in the little pool.
No, it's one at a time. It doesn't
That's
matter how
fair.
big
I
they
guess
are.
you shouldn't rush
Yeah.
pygmies just because they're smaller. There's no
Yeah,
reason
you
to do
can't.
that.
You can't rush it.
They have a full size
No.
soul. They have a full size.
Exactly. There it is. You guys got to dig into this. This is like fascinating. I mean, we covered a lot, but not everything. And I'm telling you, I definitely feel like this played into a lot of things going forward, right? We see all of this movement later, and it's fascinating. And if you're
I'm so fascinated by this one because when me and you were looking this up, there's like zero information on Kilton Riggs Stewart on any major website. So you have to dig really
salty
freaking
wife.
deep.
I'm just blaming it on the salty wife. I'm not sure. I do know that it did say that she made her living afterward with this dream stuff that he did. So I'm wondering if it's marketing, like how you can't get the Scientology books unless you're like, and you can't get certain ones unless you're level up. So maybe it's something like that. but I don't know.
I really would not doubt it, just because this, again, his research forms the
It's
basis
locked
for a
up.
lot of
Yeah.
psychology and thing like hypnosis that go on today, just because there was practically no one else on the planet that was going into these remote areas of the world and testing out hypnosis on people and asking them about dreams. No, it had never been done before. Everyone that he comes in contact with, and they're like, "So what are you doing out here? Like, this is a weird place to
Headhunters.
be for a white
Yeah.
guy." And he's like, I'm
Ah,
I'm collecting their dreams. And they're like, this guy is freaking out of
this
it.
guy's next level.
Right,
Yeah,
he's
let
like,
him
I'm
do
here to
it.
collect
He's
wives. Like, I just want to
yeah.
bang like as many pygmies as I can, and you're here to collect their dreams. Like, all
Yeah,
right,
no
guy.
kidding. Yeah. And he didn't even want to get in with that. He had to be talked into that one. So
That's true. Yeah.
oh, that's too funny. Well, Kilton, you gave us a good run. I think this was a good one. I think there's a lot more, probably, like we said, that we will never know until if the widow gives it up. Who knows?
Well, I would
I
love to find more of these like little
man.
crypto Mormons out there that
Yeah.
like, because again,
We're gonna
if you
look.
read this book, aside from him mentioning once, I think that like it reminded him of the story of Joseph Smith. So if you knew what to look
Mhm.
for, you'd be like, oh, this guy's a Mormon. But if you
Yeah.
read any of the synopsis book or any of the ways it's
No, you
utilized,
wouldn't think so.
no one mentions the Mormon upbringing, but he himself makes it very clear that this whole trajectory was owed to him being a Mormon.
Yep. Yep. That it came from Joseph Smith and the going out and asking about ye that lack of wisdom. That was his exact words. So it definitely was. He said it was critical. So
Well, you heard it here first. Kilton Riggs
yes,
Stewart, Pygmies and Dream Giants. With a
right.
title like that, it
So weird.
immediately attracted my attention.
Yeah, exactly. We definitely had to go there. We had to go there.
Okay, well, what else
Oh
you got
boy.
going on for the rest of this month? And keep in mind, this is for the backlog. So when I say this
Yes.
month, I
Yeah.
think I'm talking about
The
May or
next
maybe
month.
even June. So what's going on
Yeah.
in May or June?
So I just still we're doing the Patreon series Blood Atonement. I am gonna release one and let it go full out, and it's about Tim Ballard. And I just feel like it's information that definitely needs to be out there with Ex-Mojo. He is an atheist ex-Mormon, and I am a Christian ex-Mormon. So we have a great dichotomy on the show together. That's for Patreon, $5. You get 2 shows guaranteed a month. Normally they run 2 to 4 hours. So I think it's worth it. But yeah. And I've got tons of new guests coming your way. So I'm up to 2 shows a week now on mine. So some of them I'm replaying old ones that were on other people's on Tuesdays, and then Sundays is our new releases. So I'm hoping to keep it that way until they're all new releases.
Right on. Always bigger and better. Keep
Yes.
growing.
Right? Let's do this. And as always, I have a great time here. This one's always so funny. Oh boy.
Yeah,
We
honestly,
never
this show inspires me to look up new information that I wouldn't for any other show that I do with anyone. Like there was
Oh, that's
zero
cool.
chance that I ever would have found out Kilton Riggs Stewart outside of this particular show. So that's why
Yeah.
we do it.
We're gonna look for some other cool ones. I have some that I've done already on my Patreon that would be really interesting. There's some weird connections to Nazis. And so I'll talk to you about it. It's pretty weird. So I'll tell you about that one. And we might want to go down that rabbit hole.
All
Nazis
right.
and Mormons.
Well, we'll figure out what the next one is. We got plenty of time for
All
the
right.
backlog.
Yes.
So
Yes, exactly. There we go.
and I'm doing something new now. I'm playing credits of Patreons at the end of these episodes. So
Oh, awesome.
if you want to see your name in the credits, you can join for as little as $3. The highest one is $7. I might go higher if I can offer something else in the near future. But until then, if you want to see your name in the credits, if you want to support, go follow Heidi, go follow me, and we'll see you for the next Mormon Monday. See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Feel me, Lord. Yo. I scribble my life away, driven to write the page with
Will it enlighten your brain? Give you the flight, my plane, paper the highs ablaze. Somewhat of an amazing feel when it's real to real. You will engage it. Your favorite, of course, the Lord of an arrangement. I gave you the proper results to hit the pavement. If they get emotional, hate, maybe a language, a game, how they playing it well without Lakers. Evade them, whatever the cost, they are the shapeshift. Snakes get decapitated, met is the apex. Execution of flame you out, nuclear bomb distributed at war, rather gruesome for eyes to see. Max them out, then I light my trees. Blow it off in the face, you're despising me for what though? Calculated and rather cutthroat. Paranoid American must be all the blunt smoke for real. Lord, give me a day away, vacate. They wait around to hate whatever they say. Man, it's not in the least bit. We get heavy rotate when the beat hits, so thank us, you're welcome. Fuck you niggas for real, you're welcome. They ain't never had a deal, you're welcome. Man, they lacking appeal, you're welcome. Yet they doing it still, you're welcome.